Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pen Tester Recruiter podcast. I'm joined today by my good friend Gene Harmon. How you doing, Gene?
Good. How about yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. I'm in the UK, and it's cold and raining as it is pretty much every day, mate.
Fantastic.
So, I'll just give Gene a bit of an introduction. So he's currently the Vice President of Cyber Operations at a company organization called SixGen. For those of you who may or may not be familiar. Prior to that, Gene was a senior offensive security engineer. So he's been in the industry for a long time. I think there's a lot that the listeners can get from you today, Gene. So I've done a little bit of an intro there, buddy, but I could never do it as well as you. Who are you, mate, and what have you been up to?
Yeah, so that's definitely the title. I do all things operationally at SixGen. But yeah, no, I've been in the industry for quite a while, and I got into it back in, believe it or not, the 80s. As far as when I was a kid, learning how to do this. Never thought it could be a career back then. But watching war games with Matthew Broderick was like what piqued my interest into it. And I've done a little bit into it and then made it a career eventually. So it's been a fun process.
Gene, back in the 80s, cybersecurity as a career was probably questionable. I bet offensive security as a career was probably didn't even exist. It probably wasn't a thing, was it?
No, you had the movies like Sneakers where they were robbing the banks and whatnot, right? But trying to find a path to get to those careers that didn't exist, right? Like it was, you had to know someone that knew someone, and there was such a small pocket of people that did that. Never in my right mind, I think it would be like it is today.
Very good, very good. Okay, Gene, first question from me. There's a lot of different opinions about the best route or an optimal route to come into offensive security. In your opinion, for the listeners, what do you think's the optimal or the best route to becoming a pen tester these days?
Yeah, it's a complicated question, right? We're not doctors that have this easy, drawn out path for us. So I think the most important thing is foundational skills, like really focusing on getting to know the foundation. And there's a few ways to do that. One is that whole help desk route to admin network. And then there's always the network side. You can come in that way. And then there's also the programmer or software dev side to start moving into that industry. But really getting that foundational knowledge in whatever direction you go, you're probably going to have some gaps to shore up at some point. There's also the traditional school route, but again, you're going to have some gaps. You're going to sacrifice some time that you could be working in a career with some schooling. So as an optimal path, I'm not sure if there is a perfect path, but it's definitely foundational. Wherever you start, make sure you know that foundations. Whether you do go that sysadmin route, network admin, or programming route, just foundations. Focus on them, know them, and be able to be an expert in those areas.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks, mate. So if you've got, so ideally it would be kind of like from a younger age, maybe doing a computer science degree or something like that. If you haven't got that, or you can't afford that type of education, or perhaps you're coming into offensive second later life, is there like an optimal certification route or anything else you could help us with?
So this is definitely opinion, and it could be a point of contention for some people, but
we like them.
So I feel like the trifecta and CompTIA really does a great job with this. It lays a foundation for what you need to know in a short time span. You don't have to dedicate years of experience, but some focused study. So A+, that kind of gets you a foundation, how a computer actually works, right? Assembly and bits, as you guys say, bits and bobs, right? Is that that?
Is that English then?
I'm pretty sure. You learn the ins and outs that way, and then you go into the network side with Network Plus as a great foundation on networking, and then Security Plus to give you the overarching aspect of security. Because cybersecurity in the general sense, or information security, we've definitely lost that war on that term, but cybersecurity is such a broad concept that there's not really, you can say you want to get into the industry, but what do you actually want to be doing? Is it pen testing? Is it something in the SOC or blue team, something along those lines? Or is it something else, compliance? Because that's a thing too, right? So I think Sec Plus gives you a kind of a taste of all that. At least it kind of broadens that out. So you get that trifecta, right, of those three certifications, and then you can start honing into a specialty And obviously this one's probably pen testing, right? We're going to focus on that vein. And that's the way I chose to go. There's a lot of resources out there now to go that direction after the certification. Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, things like that.
Yeah, no, there is. That's it. I mean, if I go back to the top of the conversation, if we go back to how it was before, it's probably without in danger of sounding like one of those older guys that goes, you don't know what it was like back in my day, but it's probably easier now. There's almost, I don't know if there's almost, do you think there's almost like an overload of information, so much so that people just don't know where to start because it's just that much around? Or,
yeah, I think this goes both directions, both in the customer sense and also in the job seeker sense. So we all heard the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Marketers get a hold of these scary concepts and start pushing out these agendas. And I think what we're seeing on the certification side or the training side is we're seeing something similar to that. Maybe not as much of the fear side of things, but they're definitely pushing the pie in the sky dreams and really pulling at your aspirations. So yeah, I think there's an overload of information out there where you're trying to sift through all the stuff that makes this career. And everyone's saying they have the answer. So I think there is definitely the other side. Back when we were first learning and coming up, we didn't have Cyber Mentor wasn't making his videos, and Hack the Box wasn't a thing, and OSCP wasn't a thing. And so you would go to IRC and try to do one thing at a time. And you would learn this like real narrow, and like today, which can be almost a joke, but you would find this like one little area and you would focus on it, figure that out, and then move on. And the whole time someone's just telling you, get better at it, get good. But yeah, I think they have the other problem of having too much information for sure.
Yeah. Gene, this might be quite a hard question to answer, but obviously we've mentioned Try Hack Me, Hack the Box. If you was to strip it all back and, I don't know, say you were going to focus for a shortened period of time and get loads of self-development gains out of, I don't know, a month or a 6-month period, what resources would you focus on if there's too much out there? I'm presuming Hack the Box and Try Hack Me would be two of them.
There would be, yeah. Hands-on is really important. So actually getting on keyboard and doing the thing, watching a video or something along those lines are great. And it's a great starting point. But without doing it and actually going through that process, you're going to be shortchanging yourself. Finding an avenue, whichever one you enjoy doing as an operator, and actually do it. So watch your YouTube videos, get that out of your system, and then go and start doing. And don't let that decision paralysis get a hold of you too much. Just do it. And don't listen to too many people overall. Just pick your path and go with it, because we all have our opinions. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're flawed, but definitely make up your mind and just do something. That is one reason I do the Hack the Box and the Try Hack Me's of this industry, is because they are teaching by doing, and I think that's what it takes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks, Gene. I know previously when we spoke, we were talking about when juniors, because certain juniors join your organisation and you help them out and mentor them, and you were saying sometimes there's a bit of a lag time between getting them up to speed where you can put them on a engagement. Can you explain what goes on there? Why there's that downtime?
Yeah. So there's definitely a learning curve going into it. So it depends on where their starting point is. Now, if they're shored up on all those fundamental foundational skills, it goes a little quicker. If we're having to back up and fill those gaps prior, that's where it gets a little hard. But in general, when we hire a junior, we see promise in them. So we see something that they've done or they're doing that really stands out to us. So when I say that it takes a spin up time, there's a point where they just need some help. And depending on how green they are, so a true beginner would need a lot more hand holding than someone that's kind of gone through their learning curve. They've done all the steps. So yeah, if I hired someone that just got OSCP and that's all they did. So they went out, took the certification, I hired them, and I said, okay, now go do this pen test. There's a chance that one, they're going to get lost in the weeds. They're not used to operating in a real world environment. Chances are their Active Directory enumeration's low. There's going to be some huge gaps in their skill set. Then they don't know how to interact with the customer 90% of the time. They don't know how to relay that from their knowledge to get it across in a business focused mindset. So they haven't learned that skill yet. Some have, especially when they transition out of another career into this career, that sometimes fills that void. But generally they don't know what they don't know, right? That's really what it comes down to. And I have to pair them with someone that is seasoned, that's been around the block a little bit, to teach them that. So as they're coming through, all these foundational things from all the A plus, Network plus, Sec plus, OSCP, all these are foundational in the sense that they're going to get you the job. But now you have to start delivering on that job. And there's definitely a disconnect between that and doing in a real world setting.
Yeah, do you know what's really interesting about what you just said there as well is I think it's a mindset change because you said at the start there, oh yeah, if they've just got OSCP and that's all they know. I think some pen testers think, I get OSCP, that's it, I'm sorted.
Yes,
And that's just the beginning. So I think it's a mindset change as well.
Yeah, so to use like a martial arts example is you work for your black belt in martial arts. And so when I was a kid, that was like my whole goal was to get my black belt. And then finally I turned 18, I actually got it, and it took years to get it. And my instructor said, congratulations, you just started.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's all these years we're preparing you to know everything at the almost foundational level to start your real training now. So no one should discount their accomplishments in that moment, and like really celebrate those wins, whether it's A plus, Net plus, OSCP, CRTO, any of those certifications. You should really celebrate those because you're not a noob to it. You're far more advanced than the average person. It's just the career one moves so fast that no certification's ever going to teach you everything. And also it's just, you're getting to square one where you can start actually having the right conversations with the right people.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gene. Just another thing, Gene. So obviously, if I'm a junior pen tester listening to this now and I'm thinking, right, this guy takes on juniors, he takes on junior pen testers, this is what I need. You said you're looking for people with promise, looking for people that stand out. What can I be doing to make you look at me and think, God, I need that guy, I need that girl, if I'm a junior?
Oh, yeah. So I'll go back on the certifications. So the first is to get past our HR and our recruiters, right? You need to get to that technical interview. They're screening for a reason. So let me give you like a little example, and I'm sure we'll hit upon this a little bit because I know we both have this. I post a junior position, I get 100 to 500 applicants. I post a senior position, I get 12. And I'm talking about people that are actually qualified to do either one of those roles. So I need to filter, and certifications are low-hanging fruit for us to filter on. Now, so the highlights is know your stuff. So when I harp on that foundational stuff, you're going to go to a technical interview, and it's either going to be a hands-on technical interview or it's going to be like a narrative format, right? And you're going to talk through your thought processes and why you think that way and your methodology and all these things. And you don't have to know all the answers, but you should know enough where you can communicate what you've done in the past and then also how you think about that item, right? So if you hit the end of your skill set, that's fine. I don't know, or I don't know that tool, or I don't know this thing, but you can communicate how you got there, right? So now I'm learning your thought process a little bit. So that the technical chops, if you will, is important. So techniques are important too, like knowing how something works. So if you're using Responder and you throw that out there, Responder, if that's all you know is Responder, I'm not as impressed with that because that's a tool, right? How does Responder work? Tell me a little bit about LMNR and NTLM and NetBIOS and all the fun things that Responder does. If you throw out Kerber roasting, that's great. You know the term. I like the buzzword. I like the term. Now tell me how it works. Definitely diving deeper into that technical side of things is going to be real important for a junior because you need to stand apart from those 200 to 200 other people that just applied for the same spot. They're all doing hack the box. They're all getting their OCP. So you need to set yourself apart in the technical interview. And that comes with knowing what you're doing and how you got there.
Yeah. No, thanks, Gene. So I think it almost goes back to what you were saying at the start. If you've got the foundational knowledge, you're smashing CTF, you've perhaps got OSCP, you've got a deep understanding. When you get to your technical, you would have got through, hopefully, HR and your recruiters because you've got those certifications on your CV, maybe a computer science background, maybe the other certification route you talked about. But then when they get to you on the technical test, if they've done everything properly, like you said, they've got the best chance possible.
They do. How we do it is we do a 3-step process, right? We try to keep it as simple as possible. There's a pre-screening with our recruiters. That's just getting those basics out. Then you have a technical interview with usually 2 seniors, and it's very conversational. We want to get to the edges. We want to find out about it, and then you have a soft skills interview. So the last thing I would suggest for these guys, so you say they did all that, they're highly technical. They know how the ins and outs of all these different tools and techniques. The last one is that soft skills. Pen testing is a support to business needs, right? You're highlighting how they can be successful at business and reduce risk. Mm-hmm. We're not in security just to be in security. There's a business aspect to it. And being able to communicate that to a customer is huge. And so the start of that is the last step in our interview, where you're interviewing with the actual hiring manager. And that's to show your soft skills. How do you present? We usually do these with camera on so we can see how they're dressing. Even if it's not an in-person, are they, or at least dressed semi-appropriately for an interview? Cleanliness is still important. Am I going to send my 3 guys on site with this guy, and he's going to be the guy in the room that's driving everyone out of the room? And then just how they present. Are they semi-spoken? Can they get their point across well? Things like that. That's all things we consider in these interviews, because when you look at it from, security is not the end goal all the time. It's the business need that it fills. And even like frameworks like CISP that teaches a lot of stuff, they talk about how sometimes the business is going to choose to accept a risk, but it's our job to communicate that risk. That's an important part of this whole process for sure.
Yeah, no, thanks, Gene. And I agree. I think that's massive. I did a whole episode the other week on communication skills, soft skills, whatever we like to call them, because it is just, we all know what goes into a pen test and the pure value behind it, but certain end clients, especially non-technical stakeholders, they don't see any of that. So if you can't explain things properly, they just don't see the value. Are you being a good pen tester if you find everything, but no one fixes anything you find?
Yeah, and then you get stuck on some of these really hard ones where you don't find too much. And that's okay sometimes, but you need to show your method, right? Like, how did I get to this point? And why is this valuable still to do this next year or the year after? And how does this translate into your risk frameworks and everything like that? To speak this businessese to this MBA that's trying to make this process of this pen test, right? Like, he's trying to show these results on a spreadsheet at some point. So you really have to think of that at the junior level. You don't have to be perfect at it, because you're a junior still. You're still learning these ropes, but it shows, where's that promise? Where can we get you in a year or two?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks, Jane. So we're probably going to dispel a few myths here, and it's a bit of a loaded question, but is there a skill shortage, a talent shortage within offensive security in the pen testing world?
There is. Yeah, it is, but it's at the upper echelon right now. So the upper mid to senior to principal engineers is something we're in dire need of. And it's a result from being it's in its infancy. We're growing as a group, and we don't have a straight path forward to get these guys from high school grad all the way up to a senior pen testing position. It's a little bit hard. I always compare it to the medical field, because there's a very straight path, and it's highly technical and ever changing, and it's a moving line, but we don't have that. You go to college, you do your pre-med stuff, and then your medical school, then you do your internship and residency and journeyman stuff, and we don't have that in our profession. So I feel like some people that are labeled seniors at this point, so there is an advantage to this, is juniors get promoted quick once they show competence. Okay. That said, it's 100 to 500 people apply for a junior role, and then you get 12 seniors apply for a senior role. I'm not saying the juniors should run out and apply for senior roles, because it would get really frustrating really quick.
It probably is happening already.
It's probably happening, yeah. And we do see that sometimes. We're really good at finding that. But it's just a matter of, there just isn't enough skilled pen testers out there, or security professionals in general. Find a good threat hunter, right? In a SOC is challenging. So yeah, that's I would say it's not a myth. It's just where it lays on the spectrum.
Yeah. I think what it is, Gene, is that I think sometimes in the press there's this narrative yielded that there's a skill shortage, and there is, but let's say it's at the very senior end of the market. But I suppose what you're saying is the shortage isn't at the junior end, But the good news is you can really progress quick if you're
can.
dedicated and you're up for it and you're consistently persistent and you really want it.
Yeah, there's a talk I've been toying around with giving at one of the conferences, and it's called Managing Up. And I always believe that there's a good use case for this in pen testing or in security in general. Is you start on a lower job and you manage up to the powers that be to get into the role that you want, even if it doesn't exist yet. And I think that's where some juniors, they want to skip some of those steps a lot of times. But I guarantee if you did just 2 years or so in a position like that and you pushed the bounds, what the role actually wants you to do, and you learned how to navigate that process and everything, you're going to come out of that and probably be pretty on par with some of the seniors out there.
Yeah, no, very good. Thanks, Gene. Gene, before we get into the debate about PT and SAMS and OSCP and which certification's best and this, that, and the other, could you give us, I think you've done this to a certain extent already, but could you give us an ideal route from being a beginner to working in a commercial environment? What would the ideal certifications you'd like to see?
Yeah, if we're looking at certifications, so I just want some idea that you did your foundational checks at some point, whether it's career oriented, certification oriented, or college oriented. Just need some idea that there's some foundation there in just computers. I can computer. So after that's all said and done, I think the foundation right now, and the one that's going to give you the most bang for your buck, so to speak, is definitely going to be OSCP. It's been a staple in the industry for a while. Do I think it's the best certification? Probably not. It leaves a lot to be desired. I don't know it in its current form as well as I know it from before, but OPSEC has like a kind of an uphill battle to get on as relevant to what we're seeing in the real world. But so the reason I say OSCP though is that it gets you past that HR filter, right? In my world, in contracting with the government and things of that nature, it's a requirement on some of our contracts. Outside of that, I think what Heath and those guys are doing over at Cyber Mentor is really nice. It's a combination between OSCP and eLearn Security's ECPT.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry, eLearn, yeah.
They merged it together and made something very good. I like that he gives you 5 days. It's not like weird time frame thing. I find that a lot of the guys that came out of his program are actually very well prepared for a real world job. And the other two, I should say, that are hands down some of the best for my programs are the CRTOs, CRTO1 and CRTO2. That's Rasta Mouse, Daniel Dugan. He's been a mainstay at the industry for a long time. And anyone who's done like pro labs on Hack the Box probably knows Rasta and Rasta Mouse.
Yeah, they're cool.
Yeah, so that one, these guys come out of that one. They know the C2 frameworks. They know how to interact with, especially Cobalt Strike. But yeah, they can do the job for the most part. So that's CRTO. CRTO1 and CRTO2 is the two he has out right now.
Yeah, no, cool. I think as well, Gene, there's a few guys like yourself. I've got a few clients I've got in New York. They're realizing that it's not just all about OSCP now, and they're mirroring what you said. But it's true what you said. Like, there is certain companies that just will not look past OSCP.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to still say it's the best cert to get because it covers everything.
Yeah, I just find if you're going for that initial job, getting that out of the way, it's worth doing. There's some that will look past that. There's definitely postings. I always recommend people, because this industry changes so much, that go to those jobs postings and type it in. And if you're working with recruiters such as yourself, talk to them about it. You're looking at job postings more than any of us. So like definitely talk about it. Like what certification would make me better, more marketable for you to help sell me. But yeah, OSCP is a big one.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that other thing to people to get the mindset shift as well is when you get a certification, you're probably getting it for the complete, not the reasons that you thought you were getting it. You thought you were getting that certification to teach you stuff, and you are getting it to teach you stuff, but ultimately you're getting it to, that word HR buster, I found myself using that a lot as well. Almost, it sounds bad to say, but you've almost got to get out of the mindset of which one's best and which one's going to get you the most career progression, or try and, because it's a bit sad to say it like that, but it's the truth, isn't it? It's just how it is.
Yeah, and it's the same with college degrees and things like that to some degree. But yeah, you want to position yourself in the best place to get past to that technical interview, and all the other things you do to prepare for that technical interview are the things that progress you in that career. But the cert, for better or worse, isn't necessarily one of those.
Yeah. Thanks, Gene. Cool, thank you, mate. I know previously we've spoke about the importance of the pen testing methodology in terms of getting really good, being the best. Can you explain to me and the listeners what you mean by that?
Yeah. So the process you take on a pen test should be repeatable and easy to articulate. So you go through the steps: enumeration, privilege escalation, usually initial access privilege escalation, etc. And you really learn those, and you'll have techniques that you use consistently. You'll have tools that come and go, but that methodology is going to stay pretty consistent across the board. So when you're looking at what you're learning from these programs and from the certification pass and everything like that, the one thing that you could do to give yourself the edge is really know what your methodology is. And it can refine over time as you learn more, things are going to come in and come out of it. But the general steps should be there. And I think this is somewhere that OSCP does pretty well on that try harder idea. Really, they're saying enumerate harder, right? So
Okay.
they're saying go through your process again better or more thoroughly. So yeah, that's whenever I talk about methodology and what you should be learning from these programs. And the same with the foundational stuff. It's what questions you need to be asking repeatedly every pen test to make sure that you're doing well. And then just to go back to the earlier topic, a pen test that finds nothing or finds little can be valuable if you can point to the methodology and say, this is what I've tested against and it didn't exist. And this is how I tested it. So you can communicate that.
Gene, I really like that because correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's about, I'm presuming then that I'd be wise to document my methodology really well. I can then show it to the likes of, say, if I'm working with you, yourself, senior guy in the industry, or anyone else who's got a lot more experience than me. I can say, look, here's my methodology. What needs refining? What needs taking out? That would be pretty advisable. I'm taking it, I'm guessing.
It is too, and it saves you time too as you're actually doing a pen test. You can refer back to your notes, and I do recommend someone have some form of long-term note capture system that's easily searchable. And I put my notes into that framework. So I put them in, if it's a lateral spread or a privilege escalation or something like that, that's the format my notes go in. So as I see something new that comes out, I can put it directly into my note system. And right now it is Notion. So if anyone's wondering, Notion. I'm a fan of Notion right now, and that can change. But as long as it's easy to import and export out of, I'm a fan. And it works for you. Again, doing it, not just like thinking about doing it, but just go and do it. Start taking your notes and ingesting things. And you'll start to develop this process of tool validation and all these cursory things that you might not think about doing otherwise. But really, yeah, when the conversation happens and you're talking to the customer or one of your peers in the industry, you can be like, hey, I'm right here. I'm trying to get this to work or trying to do this. What else can I look for? And then that's where the teaching aspect can start coming in a little bit better.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so if it's documented, it's easier to teach people as well because you can see where they're going wrong and stuff like that. Yeah, cool.
And then you can compare notes too. So if your methodology is better than mine, or you're doing something that I don't understand, it's something we can talk about now. It's a conversation piece.
Yeah, I think I'd be doing whatever I could to get my hands on the best, most senior pen tester I know's methodology and taking inspiration or even copying it.
So that's a great point. So yeah, taking inspiration from, but I think your methodology should be one industry standard to some degree, but it should be your own, right? So you should embrace it, you should know it, you should develop it, and you should tune it over time. But taking the framework from just the standard steps of an attack and things like that from OSCP or the other frameworks out there, or even the MITRE kill chains, something like that, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to get your framework down, and then you develop it. Pull from some of the guy you read on the internet that you would like, and you validated his thought process, and you pull that in, and you pull something else, and really make it breathe.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Gene. Thanks, mate. So I've got to give you credit for this. I pinched you told me about that 5-year plan. I posted about it. I couldn't resist on Friday, but it's a wicked plan. There's loads of traction on it. I know you commented on it as well, Gene. Can you explain to the listeners why that Black Hill post from John Strand's so good?
Hey, one, John Strand is pretty smart. We won't tell him I said that, but no, he likes to lay things out and he thinks about things pretty solid. And I'm not even sure if he did the latest one on here for that. I'm not sure if he was involved in that one or not, but there's a few iterations of this, and he definitely embraces the thought process of this, and everyone at the Black Hills go through the similar kind of process. But really the core foundation is get that foundational knowledge, right? Find something that you can embrace. And it does take years sometimes to get good at something, and that's okay. You can enjoy that process. So what I like about his process is he lays down year one, you're going to be ingesting this wide stretch of information. And I look at this as get podcasts out there, get books, find any source to ingest information as you can, both about the industry and about computers in general, or anything to better yourself, right? And the way that he lays it out, and I think by year 3 or so, being able to not ingest anymore, but to give back information, I think you're in a good spot. So one, teaching helps your learning exponentially. You realize where you need to shore up when you try to teach something, right? So I encourage everyone to teach as quickly as possible, or at least show someone, mentor, because chances are wherever you are in your path, there's someone that's trying to walk your previous path, right? So helping people out. But that's really where I think his hit the nail on the head. You can't do everything all at once. You can't skip up the stairs and expect to be zero cool right away. Do your time. There's ways to shorten that 5-year plan, but I think 5 years is a very respectable, and you're not idle during that time either.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, Gene, as well, like, for me as a recruiter, all I really see is sometimes the mid, but the senior end of the market. So I see what these guys and girls are on, and I know how much fun they're having, how stimulated they are, generally speaking, how happy they are in their roles. And when you get to that, as you'll know, when you get to the senior end of the market, I know it's not all about money, but it's a nice living and it's a lot of fun, and that's never going to come by just doing a course for 6 months and then going, great, I'm a senior earning a load of money. This is great. I've got everyone after me. Every company wants me. I say it's going to be hard work. Anything that's a bit of a cliche saying, but anything that's worth having is worth fighting for. It's bound to be hard, isn't it?
It is. And one thing that John and his team touched on really well is learning doesn't have to mean you're just learning. I like the one path that I found a lot of people come out of is that MSP path, the channel as they call it. And one of the reasons, and it's kind of part of that 5 year, is that you get that rapid exposure to a lot of different technologies. And then from my earlier point on the business side, you get exposure to that business side as well, because the MSPs are usually small and agile and things like that. If you are able to get a job in an MSP of say 4 or 5 people, and you're able to either do that tech support side or you're hands-on in the field, I would say do both. And then do that. The other step is to manage up, right? And then you're making money and getting an education at the same time, right? So you're building experience still, but you're making money and you're following that plan. You're getting your foundation, then you're going to learn some kind of programming language. You're going to give back, you're going to post stuff, and then you're going to follow this full life cycle of that 5-year plan.
Yeah, definitely. No, thanks. As well, in my experience, when you're in a smaller company, progression does tend to be quicker. Yes. And I would say as well, you become pretty valuable pretty quickly. If you're the type of guy, okay, that's really latching onto stuff in a 5-6 headcount company, you're going to be, they're going to really see the benefits of teaching you a lot quickly. So it's going to be mutually beneficial pretty quick.
Yeah, show your value. Show if they don't already have a cybersecurity plan, which they might or might not, you could be that guy to help them develop that. And maybe you're not the most well-versed at it, but you're probably better than some of the other guys there because you have the willingness to do it. So taking that responsibility onto yourself and pushing that forward. Yeah, but I think a 5-year plan or some kind of plan in place is important. And so that's why I think John's 5-year kind of YouTube video holds weight. And it doesn't have to be exactly that. It doesn't have to be in that order. There's a lot of things you can change, but really documenting how you're going to get from zero and really take a firm, like a good reflection of yourself. Take self-stock of where is your skills really at? Like not where you wish them to be or where they're at right now, and how are you going to differentiate yourself to all those other junior candidates, and then make progress, figure out a realistic timeline to achieve those things. And I think that's what he does really well.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, thanks, Jim. As well, I think as well, you touched upon it then, you said about adding value. And I think that's such a key thing to remember is that even if you're my mentor, if I'm a pen tester, Gene, and you're mentoring me, it's not just a case of me taking from you all the time. It's a two-way relationship. So if I'm perhaps staying late and doing this or catching up or doing something above and beyond my job, you'll probably feel inclined to teach me some extra stuff. So I think it's remembering that it's seeing it from the other person's side and everything's a two-way thing and paying forward's key and it always comes back. And it's just remembering that sometimes.
And working late doesn't always have to be, you don't always have to work late, but if you make the time that you do spend doing whatever you're trying to learn very valuable and very directed, and yeah, it helps. And sometimes learning comes at like really awkward times when you're in, or good times or random times in a company. You'll be sitting in a meeting and you'll hear a term. Like maybe it's a while back, I think I heard PAM for the first time, or IM, they call them now, just user management systems, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, wow. Or ERP for the first time. And you hear these terms in a meeting and you might not know what they are. And you're like, you jot it down in your notebook and you're looking around the conference table. Everyone else is nodding and you're scratching your head. Make a little note of that acronym or something and either ask your boss or your peer, whatever, what they were talking about, or go research it, right? Google's your friend. Research and read everything about it. Become like a mini expert about that topic, at least a 30,000 foot level. And you're progressing that now in real time. And it's also, obviously, you heard about it in a meeting or you heard about it in a call or something like that. It's relevant, right? And then if you do want to flip that on pen testing or hacking, how are ERPs vulnerable? How do you attack that thing? So I think that real world learning gets discredited sometimes because people want to get to the end goal really quick, and that could be a problem.
Yeah. You said it at the start of the call, Gene. You said, make sure, we were talking about OSCP just being the beginning, but then you said, but make sure you celebrate those small wins. Yes. And that's so key because if you think 5 years and all you're focused on is 5 years, then you have a bad week or a bad month, you're going to get pretty down pretty quick. Whereas if you're enjoying the journey and celebrating the small wins, which is probably easier said than done. I know I'm guilty of that with stuff I do. Mm-hmm. Like I'm always just focusing on where I want to be. You're right.
It's hard.
You've got to take those small wins.
Yeah, because you're accomplishing something, so you're pushing forward, you're doing it, you're doing the thing that other people aren't willing to do, and that's important. So putting your time, doing those and celebrating those wins is important. And this is a little bit off topic. Along with those goals you're setting and things, get pretty specific with your goals. I want to be a pen tester, but I really want to focus on. So say you want to be a red teamer. Okay, great. But if I ask you, what are you interested in cybersecurity? And you say that red team stuff, that's not too interesting. A lot of people say that. What interests you? Is it what technology excites you? Is it OT, cell phones? There's so much that you can like really focus on. Because as you develop and as you go down some path, it could be leadership too, right? Like you like to lead people. As you go down a more technical path, though, you want to focus on something. You want to be a specialist in it. And that makes you super valuable to a red team. Generalizations are nice and overarching ideas are nice, but as you start focusing in on your specialties and your goals, articulate those. I want to be an expert in cell phones, OT technology, ICS, SCADAs kind of stuff. Boom. Okay. What's it going to take? And then you start identifying as that guy early on. And then by the time you are that guy, you're going to have a really good foundation in that. You're going to be the guy that they rely on.
Okay, Gene. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's key what you say as well, like backing it up with some action like that. I know what you're saying. There's probably not too many pen testers out there that don't want to get into red teaming. Some don't, some said don't, some love others. But generally speaking, a lot of offensive security folks want to get into red teaming. So you've got to back it up with some serious action because otherwise it's just noise, basically.
Yeah, and I challenge a lot of the guys that if they really do want to get into red teaming, like they think they do, and until they do it. And red teaming's fun for a little while, but it's boring too. You have to be stealthy. You have to be quiet. You have to, especially true black box red teaming. It's not like a pen test or a hack the box where you get to just let your tools fly. I mean, there's a good red team where you just don't do anything but watch and enumerate and look around. And if you do run a command, 2 people look it over before you hit send. So it's when you go interactive, it's not fast paced. It's very methodical and tedious. So sometimes I think it's okay to stop at pen testing. But again, the same thing. Like, how good are you going to be at that pen test? Because I think all these technologies that we're putting into these businesses need to be they need a pen test before they need a red team. And I think defining the term red team, I think marketers got a hold of that a little bit too much too. But yeah, so as your ideas evolve, the thing you thought you might want to do, you might need to adjust that a little bit as you learn and come over that. But I do think getting focused in on your technologies will help you out a lot.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, it's true about that term red team. I think people writing job descriptions got hold of it as well. It seems to be scattered. It seems to be scattered all over.
It did, to my dismay.
Yeah, likewise. Another thing you mentioned that I really liked is you talked about specializing in certain areas, and I think you said OT devices, and medical devices, stuff like that. I know some stuff I'm doing at the minute is to do with medical devices. There's a big demand there. But any specialisms that you're seeing that could really give people an edge?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. The two hot topics right now, obviously cloud and cloud providers, and then I mentioned it, but OT, IoT, and ICS are real big. Just what was it last year? The Florida water treatment plant getting hacked. That was a little bit more traditional IT style of a hack, but there's been others that utilized more of the OT protocols and things like that. So that's a space that's going to need to get filled in the next few years. It's where we think we're behind in security from an IT perspective and infrastructure. We're 10 years behind in the OT side right now. There's a few really good companies doing some good work there, but not many. You look at Dragos, they're doing some good offensive stuff there. Grim, to a certain extent, has their feet into it. But yeah, really, you have to, there's a void that's going to need to get filled in the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting from a career progression perspective. So, am I right in saying then, Gene, if I'm doing all the stuff that we've just mentioned, or maybe I'm doing some of it, but not all of it, but I'm doing pretty well. If I was to go and get really good at, say, pen testing AWS, that's going to give me if I was applying for a job with you, that would be like, okay, I'll talk to him, I'll talk to her.
Yeah, it makes you a lot more interesting too to talk to, right? If I have 50 interviews and they all say red team, right? And you go, I want to be on a red team, but really what I'm focusing on is AWS or Azure. And I find I just had recently was XYZ. And that's super interesting because now we can have a conversation about that. Maybe you teach me something about that topic during the interview, and I'm taking notes at this point. And that's where you want to be in some of this. Yeah. If we learn something from you on an interview, you're more likely to get that call back. And we're really open to that because we want to know that stuff. We want to know what the cutting edge is. Where's that bleeding edge of the industry? And with cloud, there's two things with cloud. One, if you're a cloud engineer specializing in AWS, Azure, or Google, or somewhere between all three of them, you're in demand already. People need that. And then from a pen testing side, people don't know what they need for the cloud pen test yet. It's getting there. It's getting more common for someone to say, hey, I need my infrastructure test. But a lot of times they don't need a full-on pen test. They might need more of a infrastructure review, right? Did I set this up right? It's really easy to misconfigure a cloud. It's kind of like the new Active Directory. Like Active Directory is super easy to misconfigure. And Bloodhound taught us how bad it can be. Like it's things we all knew before about Active Directory, but Bloodhound put it in a really nice package for us, right? Where clouds, it's the same thing. It's super easy to misconfigure. And actually, there's a talk, and I think it was at Blue Hat, and I might be getting the name wrong, but Dan Tentler, and I actually, you can't see it on the podcast, but I have his picture back there because he refuses to go to DEF CON. And since Dan refuses to go to DEF CON, I bring his picture with me.
Okay.
But he had a really great talk about, and he's someone I consider like a mentor and someone that I can rely on for those high level conversations sometimes. But yeah, he did this talk about how we've went backwards in the securing of our networks because of cloud. So that was an interesting talk for sure. And it shows where the gaps are there. But yeah, as far as marketability, you shoot through the roof when you know cloud.
Yeah. And I can see why end users particularly mess it up, because I can remember reading about AWS and it was like EC2 cloud formation. I think it's guard duty. It's what? And it's like a brand new thing all again. Is there any preference? Have you got a preference on cloud vendor that you prefer?
I don't, not personally. I just, whatever the powers that be pick for the organization.
Okay.
So from a pen testing side, we have to be a little bit agnostic, right? We have to kind of roll with the punches just because that's just how it is. We don't get to pick the technologies that we test against. we get thrown into those environments and we have to think outside the box. If you're going from an internal or you're an advisement, so you're going to be a CISO or maybe an advisor to a CISO, something along those lines, then you can get a little bit more specialized and decide which one that you're going to use, because they're going to have a more of an organizational impact than just a pen tester.
Yeah. Cool. No, thanks, Gene. Sounds like a good way to give yourself an edge, and also a lot of fun as well, I would imagine. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in all this, what's very fascinating to me about the cloud in general is a lot of the problems, just like Dan was saying in his talk, that we faced 20 years ago, we're refacing now because it all went to the cloud. And to a certain degree, non-network people or non-sysadmins created this as a code, right? And delivered this to us without thinking 100% through what the end user will do with it. Because end users will be end users, right? So we have to protect them from themselves almost. If phishing's taught us anything, right? How they decided to do this is insecure. They're getting better going backwards, but they started out with an insecure, hey, we'll give you this VM online and we'll give you a public facing IP address. Have fun. And they didn't give us anything to really secure that IP address. But yeah, that's always an interesting point.
Yeah. No, I think we mentioned before, I think the vendors could certainly be doing more, but I think by the sounds of it, they are starting to. It's probably a bit slower than everyone would like.
It is, yeah. And it always is. Yeah. And there's vulnerabilities on Windows that have been around for over almost a decade now that are a feature, not a vulnerability.
Yeah. All right, Gene, moving on to burnout. I think we both believe it's certainly real. Do you have any thoughts, though, on what the early years of being a pen tester should be like, or the later years? Where do you think the kind of balance is, or the optimal rate is? I know sometimes it's a bit of a almost, I don't know, I feel like people sometimes are scared to say that you've got to go above and beyond and you've got to work out. And yes, burnout is real, but what's your head like? Where's your head at with it all?
Yeah, I think you have to go in sprints, right? Like you have to take it in. There's time I'm preparing for this certification, right? And I'm going to get this certification. I'm going to go real hard. I'm going to really just focus myself in on this, whatever certification. I'm going to get it. And then I'm going to take more of a lax approach. I'm going to reevaluate where my priorities are. So there's a few things, like I think the front loading of your education is a good time to, especially if you're younger and you got the time, trade that in with getting what it is. But I think pacing yourself is by far another really great takeaway of the 5-year plan. I know everyone wants it now. They want to get in there. It's a way to pace yourself and have a good balance in your life and not hate this industry for sucking all the time away. But at the same token, I do look at this as an advanced field that you have to spend a lot of time at, and that you have to pay your dues, just like a law student would, just like a doctor would. And to perform at the highest level that a lot of people want to, you do have to sacrifice some things every now and then. That said, once you're at a certain level and you have some of these things, I tell a lot of my guys when they talk to me, is a difference between a good employee and a great one is the good employee works 8 hours and goes home, does everything we ask him to do. The great employee works 7 hours and then focuses 1 hour on bettering himself. And that 1 hour, whether it's that 1 hour during work or 1 hour after work, or whatever it is, that 1 hour a day really translates into a lot in a year. So yeah, once you're at a certain point, I think that you really need to do sprints, do all that thing that you want to do, or that goal, but really take into account and do those other things. Get outside too every now and then. Right?
Yeah, that's always a good idea. Yeah, I really like that. So a good employee works 8 hours a day. A great employee works 7 and has 1 for research time, and the compound effect of that 1 hour is exciting.
Yeah, and sometimes the pace or the tempo of the work doesn't fully allow it or whatnot. But I think even when you're busy, there's something you could pull out of that busyness for that hour a day. Like when our guys are traveling on assessment or whatnot, they're around a lot of really smart people. Take a little break here or there and have conversations, right? Talk what they're working on. How are they working on it? That could be your hour a day. You go to lunch with your coworkers. Hey, what have you read lately? Have that conversation. So the little things like that go a long way. They don't all have to be super focused and super intrusive into your life to make it better. I think we're one of the few industries that I could say, and no one would question me, but I could interview you and be like, hey, we hired you, you're doing really good, or let's say, and then I'll be like, but what are you doing afterwards? What kind of projects are you into? Are you doing anything on the side to better yourself? We're like one of the few industries, if go back to the med example, if I would say, are you seeing patients on the side to get yourself feel a bit better? No doctors really do that. They might read some like medical journal, or talk to a vendor or something like that, but they're not going and trying to do a whole separate side project on the side. And I think that's something that again shows our industry's immaturity.
Yeah.
In the sense that we're asking people to do that all the time.
Yeah, and you know what? That never, from even just with the nature of what I'm doing day to day, I'm speaking to senior guys all day, and that never stops. Like even the best people I know, they're still like at it, not all the time, but a lot.
Yeah, and I just like that. Like when I'm talking to my guys, I want them to have a work-life balance. I do want them to have hobbies outside the tech field, to do something. Like we said, get outside, do something. But if you're enjoying it still, and you have that drive to go do that second project or that thing, I'm okay with that. I think that's a good use of your time. It's when burnout is real, is when you say, I have to do this. I gotta go and do this thing. Or you find that lack of motivation to go sit down and do that project. I think that's when you need to start taking a step back, realign your goals is a good way to look at it, and then just decide a better way to do it, because obviously that way is making you miserable. And while it should be hard, it should never be like debilitating, where you're like, oh.
Gene, I like what you're saying, like working sprints, take the small wins, find something else to do outside of InfoSec. I think there's a lot of key things there that you're saying that if they're put into practice, you're always going to protect yourself against any burnout, if you like.
So, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's one of those, it comes with time, right? When you're younger, you think you can do it all, but over time, I think you figure out the best processes, and you save your energy a little bit here or there, because you don't have as much of it as you get older. So it's
use it wisely.
Yeah, so use it wisely. But I think the young guys could benefit from it a lot. Really push at it. Do what you're there to do. It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So you're in it for the long haul. You're going to make a difference. And salaries are going to come. They're going to go. They're going to go up and down. All that stuff is going to be fluid and things outside of your control. But your time is definitely in your control. So guard it a little bit.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Gene. You might have answered this. Well, you have answered this already in some of your other questions, but I'll ask you anyway, and it's a big question. But what skills, personality traits, attributes do you feel are necessary for an individual to possess to become a highly successful pen tester in today's market?
Oof, it's a good one. So curiosity is obviously like something that I think is prized. Technical aptitude, it goes without saying. They have to have that. For the soft skill side, I think being able to work on a team while hacking and pen testing might seem like a solo activity. It's not. It's definitely a team sport. So it's one of those things that you might not always be hacking on a team where you're doing the work, but you're going to be working with a lot of different people over the course of your career. Some you're going to love, some you're going to hate, and it's something that you have to learn to adapt to it. So I really think that if you embrace some of those, always have that thirst for curiosity, as the Hacker Manifesto would say, but really focus in on that, get your technical aptitude up, and then just be a team player, learn how to focus in those parameters on a team.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Gene. And as we come to the end here, so which book or podcast has had the most positive effect on your career so far within InfoSec?
Yeah. So I'm an avid reader and podcast enthusiast. So I would say the number one podcast, I still love Darknet Diaries. I think it's a great motivational podcast for the industry. Beers with Talos is great for a little update. Don't always love the format, but I think you're going to get some good information at it. And then the Black Hills Information podcast is great. I think that they do a mix. They do the security news, and then they do more tutorial style. And then books, there's a lot of books out there that are great, especially for technical sides of things. Windows Internals, I think everyone should read. But there's a book for goal setting and design called Design My Life, I think it's called. I think it's Bill Burnett or Bennett, something like that. It teaches you how to think proactively about your goals. And I've read it a while ago. I like a lot of goal setting anyways, breaking your goals down into bite-sized chunks, so to speak. Yeah. So I think that's huge. That was a great paradigm shift on how I thought about my long-term goals, and also how to set realistic goals was another thing that I taught. You can find your pie in the sky goal. You write that out, do that, and then put your realistic goal in there, and then also put your worst case scenario goal.
Okay.
Like
Right.
I guarantee that it's going to be somewhere in the middle of all those, right?
Yeah.
But not all of them are bad. They're usually all tolerable.
Yeah.
And then I would say one last thing that's probably helped me a lot is, so again, with the goal setting, is there's something called the best self journal. And it's just another take on like the Covey method of time management and blocking your schedule and things like that. It's just a different take on it. I find it very useful to, basically they say don't set more than 3 goals in a 90-day period or a sprint.
Okay.
And then they have the book that breaks down those goals every week for you. So you write your overarching goals, some action items and milestones, and then you break out those goals even further for that week. And it doesn't seem like this huge mountain because you put that hour in there and you go and do it. So I think from that standpoint, those have been my go-tos over the years to kind of just design where I wanted to be in life. And whether it's pen testing or, as we were talking before we started recording, but the pilot's license, anything like that, I break out into these goals and I try not to tackle more than 3 at a time.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thanks, Gene. So for everyone listening, Gene's doing his flying license. So something to take him away from offensive security now and again.
Yep. Get up there and veg out for a little bit.
That's great. And you know, there's so much you're doing. I think it's applicable to anything, but there's so much you're doing. And in relation, I can tell from those books you've just mentioned, to keep your mindset right. And I think if we bring it back to pen testing, I think if your mindset is right, yes, you've got to learn the technical skills and this, that, and the other. But I think if your mindset's right, it can take you a hell of a long way with a bit of persistence thrown in. It can count for a lot, can't it?
It can, yeah, and take control of it. Like you could blame anyone for not succeeding at this, which could be true. Like your concerns could be valid, but really, you have control of setting your pace. And if you get rejected, and I have an employee that was rejected 100 times or something like that from different employers before we hired him, he didn't just quit. He readdressed those skills. So he would get feedback. He'd go fix that feedback and he would go do what they said to do. And I really think that kind of mindset, that you're not going to fail at it, and just a no is just one step closer to yes mindset. It can go a long way. And don't play the victim. Just own it. Just go and make yourself better so no one can say no to you. And then I think that's a key that a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of juniors say that, but I come across a lot of people that think that the work side of things for us to do on the other side, but no, it's internal. You have to work on yourself first before we can help you.
No, definitely. As well, Gene, to finish off, I think as well, like, that's part of a key hacker mindset. You can't just have a quick look inside a system and go, oh, nothing here, on to the next one. You've got to be not take no for an answer to a certain extent. Yes. You've got 100%. Got to find stuff. You can't just miss stuff and on to the next one. It's part of being a good hacker. So it all ties in.
Yeah, that could be like a good point, like to tie it all together. Yeah, the hacker mindset goes to every aspect of life, not just computers. You have to stay curious and you have to define the reason for things. And I always look at like my dad as an example. He was really good with cars and woodworking and all this kind of stuff. And he would piece things together and they weren't supposed to work that way, but they did. And so that's hacking in its own way. So it doesn't have to be computers that you're hacking away on. It could be cars or something like that, but it's always the process that you hack. Yeah, for sure.
Gene, thank you. Is there anything I should have asked? Anything else to cover or about there? Or I know we've gone over time. I promise you it'll be an hour. It's been an hour and 10 almost. So sorry, mate.
Yeah, no problem.
Brilliant. Gene, thanks for your time, mate. It's been really good. Thank you, buddy.
No problem. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, mate. Cheers, buddy. Bye, mate.